Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, March 5, 2025, time in Texas, about 10 a.m. We have breaking news. It appears the U.S. and the U.S. military prep for war, and that would be at both of our borders, Mexico and Canada, possibly over the Taiwan Strait. I believe the U.S. military preps for war with the cartels and the CCP. So we have this coming out that in the last hour or so, and this is covert intel from Hal Turner, the U.S. has repurposed 130 U.S. Department of Defense satellites to monitor the border, both with Mexico and Canada. Do I believe the war is going to be with the people of Mexico or Canada? No. I do believe we are on the brink of a kinetic, hot shooting war with the cartels and the CCP, both from Mexico and from Canada. The U.S. has changed the orbit of 130 satellites to now monitor the borders of the U.S. with Mexico and Canada. This has not been done before to monitor illegals or drugs. No. I believe it's being done now, preparatory to a kinetic war. And we have these satellites being repurposed. These satellites can see, they can hear, they can take temperatures. They are also equipped with LiDAR, which means they can see underground. And the U.S. routinely does this prior to engaging in military force. And we have this. We've been seeing the U.S. military prepping for this use of military force on our borders. Recently, over Mexico, we've been seeing excuse me, in the last 2 weeks, warships off of our west coast, recon rivet joint planes over Mexico. Just a few days ago, there were reports of 7 Black Hawk helicopters flying over Mexico, and this was in agreement with the Mexican government and military. But this has been happening. Also, in the last 2 weeks, we've been seeing U.S. Predator drones, MQ-9 Reaper, over Mexico. We've also seen thousands of U.S. military troops excuse me, placed on the border, including the 82nd Airborne Division and the 10th Mountain Division. We've been seeing combat divisions being placed on our border in conjunction with the U.S. Department of Defense repositioning satellite orbits over Mexico and Canada. They also, just a few hours ago, also repositioned satellites to monitor the Taiwan Strait. Yes, I've come to the conclusion in the last couple of weeks that a hot shooting kinetic war with Mexico and Canada, and again, it's not the people of Mexico or Canada, it will be with the cartels and the CCP, which are embedded in both Mexico and Canada, and We also have inside the U.S., it's believed, possibly up to 1.2 million CCP military brought in by the JB, the Dem political party, who were in collusion with the Chinese, it's believed, by hundreds of millions of American citizens to bring down America. And I've got this to say to American citizens who are still self-identifying with the Dem political party. What's up with that? And we have this. So we have President Trump pursuing peace. This will be peace in Ukraine and in Israel and in the U.S. We know that our number one target now for U.S. peace is the U.S. borders with Mexico and Canada. So that's going on. And just in the past few minutes, the U.S. has cut, in the last 24 hours, cut from Ukraine, cut. Ukraine is out of U.S. money, U.S. guns, and U.S. intel. Now, the intel, there's been a clarification. The intel that has been cut to Ukraine and is, we assume, not being shared with other European allies so that it could be given to Ukraine. But this intel is to keep Ukraine from firing missiles deep inside Russia. So that's going on. And we have this. I'd like to say thank you to Ted and Teresa J. and Margaret J. for extra support for my channel. We had this recently from Judge Napolitano, a recent interview with Pepe Escobar. He's an economist currently based in Russia. On March 4, Israel is to cut aid to the Gaza days before Ramadan, but President Trump made a phone call and reversed that. So that's going on. Excuse me. We have this from a Patriot subscriber, March 4. The Dems are sabotaging in collusion with Zelensky. I support also sabotage. I support also that the U.S. is being sabotaged by Canada. Trudeau today, March 4, in a speech, gave a real anti-Trump tirade. Yes, it appears that the government of Canada is in collusion with China and the CCP and the cartels to act against the United States of America. And I'd like to say thank you for extra support for my channel to Mark J. and Becky D. Thanks so much. And I have this. And I'd like to say I have a subscribe button in the lower right corner of my screen. Thanks for like, subscribe, and share. And for hitting the like button that helps my channel to grow. I have a Patriot subscriber. C. Zelensky needs to get money he needs to get his money from UK since he made his bed with UK. Yes, I agree with that. We now know that Zelensky signed a secret minerals deal with UK January 16 or January 17. You know, there's a time difference between the U.S. and Europe. Just a few days before President Trump was inaugurated, giving the UK 100% of all minerals, oil and gas, and so on. Yes, I agree with my Patriot subscriber. Z made his bed with UK, letting him get money from the UK. And another Patriot subscriber. I agree the US should get out of NATO and also the UN. Yes, we have some other sources that share that view. And we have this. We're having heavy chemtrails on the east coast of Florida, big time. Yes, we are in Texas also. I go outside, the sky looks pewter, the color like gray-brown, and very low. Chemtrails. I have a Facebook friend. President Trump and his tariffs, yes, they kick in today on Canada and Mexico tariffs 25%. So that's going on. And as a result of President Trump putting tariffs out, we now have a new car manufacturing facility to be built in Indiana, moving from Mexico. That's Honda. From Stephen Gardner, we have that Zelensky wants to buy weapons from the U.S. Yeah, now he wants to sign a deal. Yeah, I'm ready if the U.S. is going to cut off money, guns, and intel. Well, hey, I'm ready to sign a deal. The people of America say to Zelensky, shut up. So that's going on. And some other things are coming out about Zelensky. So, not good at all. All right, we have this. Yeah, we had a recent earthquake in Hollywood, a 3.9. That was on March 2. And for space weather, it's pretty quiet. We may have today's March 5, so yeah, the sky, in terms of coming geomagnetic storms is very quiet. We did have over Texas and central U.S. in the past few days thunderstorms. It's quieted down. We may have coming up this weekend over central U.S. and North Texas some much colder weather. So that's coming. Newsweek. Oh yeah. Chrystia Freeland, formerly a Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, leader of the Liberal Party in Canada. Now, I want to refresh our memories. I did a report that Chrystia Freeland, she somehow stepped down from her position, or was right before stepping down from her position as Deputy Prime Minister. That happened in about December. Well, the JB show was in power. She came over to the U.S., to the Federal Reserve, to borrow $500 billion from the U.S. for Canada. And as President Trump has pointed out, U.S. annexing Canada to be the 51st state would actually save us money. And she took the $500 billion back to Canada. So who is paying the bills in Canada now as Canada turns anti-U.S. and anti-President Trump? It is the U.S. who is paying for this occurrence. So that's going on. Now, just in the past couple of days, Chrystia Freeland, leader of the Liberal Party in Canada, we'll get nukes from France and we'll put them in Canada so we, Canada, can fire nukes into the U.S. I'll say this to Chrystia Freeland, who demonstrates a lack of brain activity. Number one, Chrystia Freeland, the U.S. military would never allow nukes on our border, and that's the position that Russia has with nukes, with Ukraine becoming NATO and putting nukes right on the border of Russia. That's the same problem Putin has. The U.S. would never allow French nukes in Canada. One. And number two, Chrystia Freeland. France doesn't have the lifting power to move those nukes. France does make nukes, but France relies upon the U.S. to move its nukes. So, Christina, you might want to think through before you open your mouth and essentially say things about Canada that technically would be stating something that places Canada in a position of war against the U.S. So ding dong. So that's going on. Yeah. And we have this. Newsweek. Panama Canal. Yeah, we have some things going on. So we know, and I believe this is going to come to be, that the U.S. will take Greenland, Canada, Mexico, Central America, and the Panama Canal. Now we have some things going on with Panama. We had an American investment group, Blackstone, take over the ports that are on each side of the Panama Canal from C.K. Hutchison. So that's going on. And the CCP, agrees to sell its ports to BlackRock. So we see President Trump was accurate. The Panama Canal is now in control of the CCP, but it's agreed to sell. So we'll see how this comes with this coming war activity. And we have in Norway. So right here we have Russia, Ukraine. We have Finland, Sweden, Norway. Norway is a NATO nation. The U.S. Navy had subs that stopped in Norway to refuel. The primary Norway refueler, Hull Bunkers, refused on political reasons to refuel the U.S. Navy subs. Almost immediately, the Norway government came out and condemned that and said, of course, Norway, we're a NATO nation. We work with the U.S. This was a move by Hull Bunkers in a political move against the U.S. and President Trump, who we know is bringing down the deep state. But the Norway government came out almost immediately. And we see the U.S. To engage in a military exercise with Norway and other NATO nations. in Norway, March 3 through 10. So that's going on. And now we have this. We have from Express News. Yeah, Norway refuses. Yep, I got that. And we have this from Independent Sentinel. We have some things going on in Europe. Now we see, as I put out in a previous video, that Europe has stabbed the U.S. in the back. I mean, everyone would have known that UK had secretly signed a minerals deal plus with Zelensky before President Trump was inaugurated. Europe demonstrates and lifts its skirts to show that it is indeed a woman for sale. And it has been sold and it is in control by the deep state. So we have Europe, UK, France, Ukraine made their own deal. That's right. And now these three nations, UK, France, and Ukraine, want to make a consolidated group, and France would supply Ukraine with nukes. Never happening, because the U.S. military is not going to move them. And we have this. The UK, France, and Ukraine had an emergency meeting that was over the weekend to discuss how they could put forth the war effort. And but they meet, and we know they have met in secret before to stab us in the back economically with regard to Ukraine. And now these three nations, the UK, France, and Ukraine, meet secretly, and yeah, we'll put French nukes in Ukraine and you can bomb Russia. But oh, we're not going to include the U.S. in our planning, but we need the U.S. And Starmer says, yeah, I'm going to come back to the U.S. and talk to Trump. We need U.S. money and military lift to get all of this done. Starmer, shut up. And now we have this. Yeah, from Hal Turner. Yes, this happened March 2nd. Russia sank a UK ship that was carrying bombs, I believe, and that happened in the Black Sea near Ukraine. Russia used Iskander-M missiles, hypersonic, to sink the ship. The MSC Levant F was registered in Switzerland. Excuse me. Russia says the ship was carrying UK weapons and drones. This was near the port of Odessa. So we see back and forth. Gateway Pundit. Yeah, the Norway reports the Norway government did intervene after Hallbach bunkers refused to refuel the U.S. Navy subs. So that's going on. Yeah, we don't want a problem with the U.S. Okay. Washington Examiner brings this out. That we have going on in, at the border, we have, this is the recent transition of U.S. military to the border. 3,000 troops. This happened in the past 48 hours. 3,000 additional active duty U.S. military to the border. This is a motorized brigade. They went in with 20-ton armored vehicles, which are Stryker combat vehicles. So that's going on. Yeah. And now we have this. Okay. It's been confirmed that there was a raid on the FBI, not this past Saturday night, but the previous. There was a raid on the Department of Defense by the FBI, and it was General Mike Flynn who let the FBI know there were a lot of Epstein files there. And at 3 a.m. in the morning, the FBI found generals shredding documents while their aides guarded the doors. So the generals are under the control, most likely, of JAG and are being interrogated. Excuse me. Now, it's believed and is being recommended that the U.S. immediately withdraw from NATO and the UN and move all U.S. troops and equipment out of Europe. And one of the sources for this, in addition to U.S. intel, is Martin Armstrong, a globally famous economist, recently interviewed by Alex Jones on INFOWARS, that came out on Steve Quayle's Aggregate site. And Martin Armstrong says that his predictive software program, Socrates, that's been in place for decades and successfully predicted such things as 9/11, states that recommends that the U.S. withdraw from NATO and UN immediately, and also immediately move U.S. military and equipment out of Europe. And we have this going on, another stab in the back by the UK of the US. We have an island, Diego Garcia. And this is located between India and the Middle East. And it's part of a chain of islands. So let me draw you a better map here. We have Africa, India, the Middle East. There's a chain of islands right about here. Diego Garcia has on it a significant U.S. military base needed for U.S. national security, in which the U.S. has invested $9 billion. However, these islands are the U.S. is leasing Diego Garcia and some other islands from the UK under a 99-year lease. Now, Starmer wants to give to a small nation off of the coast of Africa, Mauritius. The UK wants to give to this small island nation all of these islands, including the U.S. Diego Garcia military base. Apparently, Starmer doesn't realize that the UK does not own the U.S. military base, SPRINGSTEEN. So that's going on, and we had a Senator Kennedy. He came out and was doing a good presentation. So these islands collectively are called the Trevose Islands. And Starmer, and no doubt Starmer, somehow would be making money here. Oh yes, I remember another detail. So Starmer is going to give the Trevose Islands, including Diego Garcia, to this small island nation, Mauritius, and the U.S. can rent from Mauritius Diego Garcia for $18 billion to be paid out over the next 10 years. So we see Starmer trying to put in place a deal that benefits his deep, sticky, greedy pockets. Keir Starmer is upfront, close and personal, and self-identifying as an enemy of the United States of America. So that's going on. And now we have this. Yeah. So Hal Turner brings this out. A few days ago, Europe had an emergency meeting. That was following that disastrous White House meeting last Friday between Zelensky, President Trump, and Vice President Vance, when Zelensky went off the deep end. It's believed by many that he had had too much of that white powder. Well, it turns out that he'd been presented with some very concrete evidence by President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. They had presented just before that TV interview some very concrete pictures and videos to Zelensky, showing Zelensky engaged in some very evil and corrupt activities with very young people. So he was out of it. So at any rate, right after that, there was an emergency meeting in Europe between Starmer, the backstabber of the U.S., Macron, and Zelensky, trying to move against the United States, but oh, we need the U.S. military to back us up. Shut up. You can't make this stuff up. All these secrets are coming out. And now we have this from Gateway Pundit. Yeah. Before the meeting of Zelensky and President Trump and Vice President Vance, we had some incriminating information about Zelensky presented to Zelensky. And this also details, information is coming out that the Dems, and once again, I say to American citizens, if you still self-identify as supporting the Dem political party, why? So we see a group of Dems and also rhinos, and rhino means Republican in name only. Rhinos, Republicans in name only, will often agree with the Dems for votes in the House or the Senate. But we see a group of Dems and rhinos meeting, technically illegally, with Zelensky before the meeting with President Trump and Vice President Vance. And I say technically illegally. There is in place in the U.S. Logan's law, Logan's rule, whereby like a president who's been elected but hasn't been inaugurated technically is barred from certain contacts with foreign nations. Same thing goes for senators and members of different political parties in the U.S. They're barred from giving advice to leaders of foreign nations because it isn't Congress who determines foreign policy. It is the executive branch, the president. However, there was a group of Dems and rhinos who met with Zelensky to advise him not to sign the deal, the minerals deal with President Trump. This included, and this happened Friday, just before the meeting of Zelensky with President Trump and Vice President Vance. And this included Lindsey Graham, rhino from South Carolina, Amy Klobuchar, Democrat, Minnesota, and these are all senators. We have Christopher Coons, Democrat, Delaware, Jackie Rosen, Democrat, Nevada, Richard Blumenthal, Democrat, Connecticut, Roger Wicker, rhino from Mississippi, Charles Grassley, rhino from Iowa, Chris Murphy, Democrat, Connecticut, Peter Wick, Democrat, Vermont, Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat from Rhode Island, Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland. I submit to President Trump, he may want to have his AG, Pam Bondi, look into, was this an illegal meeting with Zelensky? And now we have this. Stico's aggregate site, Geller Report, and also Fox News. No money to Ukraine. So that's going on. President Trump wants peace, and now today it's coming out details. So no money. The weapons have been paused yesterday on planes and ships and ports. Many weapons that were to go to Ukraine are still sitting in U.S. military bases in Poland and Romania. No money, no guns, and no intel that Ukraine can use to put missiles deep inside Russia. And now we have this from Breitbart. Yes, some good news. So President Trump's HUD has put in place rapid housing and shelter and has spent $11.4 million to provide emergency housing for individuals impacted by storms in Houston, Texas. That would have been last summer's Beryl hurricane. North Carolina, Hurricane Helene. South Carolina was also impacted. This was put in place by President Trump's Secretary of HUD, Scott Turner. So way to go, President Trump, actually putting American people first. And we heard President Trump in that speech before the House and Senate last night say, with regard to that assassination attempt in Butler, PA last summer in July that nicked his ear, that President Trump believes that God saved his life to make America great again. And we see President Trump pursuing that path. And we have this. Steve Quayle's aggregate site USA Watchdog Greg Hunter recently interviewed Martin Armstrong. And Martin Armstrong, along with his predictive software Socrates, European economy is going to crash. That's why they want to go to war. And that's why Martin Armstrong is also recommending the U.S. withdraw from NATO, UN immediately, and also move all U.S. military troops and equipment out of Europe. And we have this. President Trump, yeah, we are out. So that's good. And we have this coming from Martin Armstrong. Zelensky admits 58% of the $350 billion the U.S. gave to Ukraine is missing. So we have that. And Martin Armstrong clarifies some of the stories we've been hearing about gold. And he says, yes, gold is moving from Europe to the U.S. because many of the bankers and holders of gold see war coming to Europe, and they want to put their gold in a safe place. Martin Armstrong also believes that the U.S. gold at Fort Knox is safe, so we want to see it. And the predictive software Socrates also predicts war in Europe, and that Europe will lose. No kidding, because the U.S. will be out. So that's going on. Also, it's predicted the U.S. will have a gold and silver and also some type of crypto account with multiple types, Bitcoin, XRP, and so on. BPEARTHWATCH brings this out. The UN cries panic because the U.S. cut the money to the UN, also a dirty, evil, corrupt organization. I have this from a Facebook friend. No more of the U.S. being the world's ATM. And I agree. And we have this. 20% of the annual budget for the UN comes from the U.S., or about $18 billion. No more UN and no more NATO. The American people say. And BP continues, the UN cannot function without the U.S. Well, I personally believe the UN, deep state controlled, base of what many perceive to be a new world order. Didn't they want, through the WHO, to take over all governments worldwide? This UN is a deep state organization, and the people of America say, get up and get out of New York, the location of the UN building in the U.S., and take those blue helmets with you. And don't let the door hit you. So that's going on. So yeah, we want out of the UN. We want out of NATO. And I have this from BP. I don't know if this is his statement or he's quoting someone else. The UN is the head of the world's grifters. Yes, I would agree with that. And we have this. Yeah. President Trump, in his speech last night to the joint session, the House and Senate, said, we are taking them back. One would be the Panama Canal. We're taken back. And talking about Greenland, he talked about, negotiating, making a deal with the people of Greenland, and pointed out that they would be safe militarily. They would become rich because the U.S. would invest there, Greenland. But he said the United States needs Greenland for national security. And he said, we would like to, make an agreement with the people of Greenland for Greenland to become a part of the U.S., but we will have Greenland one way or another because we need it for national security. So that's going on, and he hopes the people of Greenland will vote to join America. So that's going on. And the Panama Canal, he says we're taking it back. Okay, we have this because CCP is trying to control it, which would shut down the flow of U.S. military ships from the west coast of the U.S. to the east coast. Can't have that. And President Trump believes there should be a mandatory death sentence. He's going to put forth a new executive order. Mandatory death sentence for the murder of any police officer. And I agree. And also that the U.S. will invest billions of dollars to build a shield over America with new technology. And the U.S. will invest in new shipbuilding companies to build both U.S. military ships and commercial ships. And we absolutely need that also for national security. And we have this from INFOWARS, a recent interview with Martin Armstrong, globally famous economist. The economy of Europe is going down. They're going to try to go to war and try to get the U.S. to backstop them. Shut up, Europe. The American people are awake, and we are going down the path of make America great again. We don't want to backstop. We want peace. We're on the same stage as President Trump, speaking peace in the Middle East, in Ukraine, in China and Taiwan. We would prefer peace, and in Mexico and in Canada. I will say this, of hot shooting kinetic wars, they are barbaric and emblematic, generally, of uncivilized nations. If, however, that's the only path forward to eventually get to peace, then a kinetic war sometimes needs to be fought. And what I mean by this is you have evil and corrupt enemies who will not stop unless you engage in a hot kinetic war with them and you kill them. That has been proven throughout history. In other words, this is not a nation with whom you can negotiate trade and peace and so on. And we know the cartels are evil and corrupt. They engage in trafficking, drugs, guns, smuggling, and so on. They are evil to the core. They simply must be eradicated. The same thing is true of the CCP, who have been, their minds and their thinking is not logical, and they also will simply kill to gain benefit. So they also must be eradicated. And I will say this, bringing up a point, we know in the past the U.S. fought a civil war, and where we had brother against brother. One location was the Stones River battle that took place in Tennessee, and I reference this for the common analogy of river. So we saw in 1862, during the course of the U.S. Civil War, Stones River battle. We see in Ukraine, Oskol River. Thousands also killed young soldiers, as we did see at the Stones River battle in Tennessee in 1862. We also saw thousands of young soldiers killed. We see similarly in Ukraine over the Oskol River, thousands of young soldiers killed who ethnically are brothers. They are Slavic people. Now, here's a demonstration that the war in Ukraine is a deep state effort to kill all of the Slavic people in Ukraine, both those who speak the Ukraine language and those who speak the Russian language. Zelensky said, one of Ukraine's military objectives is to de-Slav Ukraine. That means that the people that live in Ukraine are Slavic. That's their ethnic group. So by Zelensky saying our military objective is to de-Slav Ukraine, what he was announcing to the world was the deep state goal of killing every man, woman, and child in Ukraine. So that's going on. So we see a similarity between the U.S. Civil War, brother against brother, fought over a river, and we see the same thing, battles over a river, brother against brother in Ukraine. And now we have this. Yeah. And General Mike Flynn also brings out this information. Some of the people who were involved in that assassination attempt against President Trump last July in Butler, PA, one of the participants in planning or backing could have been a former State Department employee, Victoria Nuland. And we know that Victoria Nuland was active in the U.S. State Department takedown of the democratically elected government in Ukraine in 2014. It all comes around again, doesn't it? And we have this. Hal Turner brings this out earlier this morning. No more intel to Ukraine. This was announced by CIA Director John Ratcliffe, President Trump's CIA director. Confirmed the U.S. has stopped intel to Ukraine, and this is included in the pause of money and weapons. Yeah. So that's going on. And we have this from GB News. The U.S. is in talks to cancel U.S. military money and weapons to Ukraine. Yeah, this has been dynamic in the past few days. Also, talk about the U.S. withdrawing CIA and other intel sources from Ukraine. And that President Trump was in the process in the last few days of discussing this with his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. And these two people, Rubio and Hegseth, would then, once President Trump mapped out what would be stopped to Ukraine, these two people would be in charge of implementing President Trump's decisions. Well, we now know he has elected to stop money, guns, and intel. So Rubio and Hegseth are in charge of implementing that. So that's going on. President Trump to Starmer of the UK and Macron of France. Yeah, the U.S. wants to see Europe plan to stop fighting, put a peace plan on the table. So that's going on. No, as we've heard from Martin Armstrong, Europe wants war. Their economy has been trashed. Now we have this from also Hal Turner's Intel. The U.S. is to pull 20,000 troops from Europe. And they're to come back to the U.S. As I've said, it's apparent, based on the repositioning of satellites this morning, that the U.S. does prep to engage in what appears to be a hot shooting kinetic war with Mexico and Canada, the cartels, the CCP. So, just a few days ago, March 2nd, U.S. planning to pull 20,000 troops from Europe. And Europe is engaged in sabotaging U.S. peace efforts. So we have that going on. And we have this. Yeah, no peace. Europe wants no peace. And we have this. Yeah, but Europe wants to be in charge of the war because the U.S. wants peace, but Europe wants the the U.S. military to back up Europe. Not happening. Yeah, and President Trump is putting this forth. The U.S. will be out of Europe, and the Ukraine is free to fight to their bitter end. So that's going on. And now we have this from Snopes website. So an oppressor put forth by President Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. DOGE has found $2.7 trillion that was spent in error overseas through Medicaid and Medicare. We know Medicaid and Medicare are two health programs of the U.S. government. One for seniors and disabled, and one for to help people who operate below the poverty level. Medicaid and Medicare are two government health programs. DOGE has found out that from Medicaid and Medicare, $2.7 trillion has been spent overseas. Okay. And also has come across a pattern of small contracts like $1 million. But when they follow up, they find out $1 million went out of the U.S. government, but to the contract group or company, they only received $500,000. So from the time it left the U.S. government bank account to the bank account of the company that the U.S. government had contracted with, $500,000 was lost somewhere. Where did it go? And oh, you know, these brilliant people with software and AI, they can track it down. And I say to DOGE, let's start seeing some faces of individuals who are being arrested and charged for stealing American taxpayer money from the U.S. federal government. Let us, the American people, see justice being done on behalf of the American people. And we have this, President Trump. Yeah. So President Trump, Make America Great Again, wants to make a move that interest you would be paying on a car loan could also be tax deductible. And that and this would be tax deductible interest on cars for only on vehicles manufactured inside America. Make America Great Again. And also to cut taxes on oil and gas development to also spur oil and gas development, drill baby drill, inside the U.S. and bring down our gas prices at the meter. Yeah. And to continue tariffs against nations. Did you know all these tariffs President Trump is bringing forth? He's bringing forth the same percentage of tariff against other nations that these other nations have always been charging against the U.S. But because we had evil and corrupt government leaders who were receiving kickbacks, no doubt, they allowed these other nations to overcharge the U.S. So when you hear criticism of President Trump about the tariffs, it's good to understand he's only charging the same amount of tariff on these nations as they're charging America for American goods to go into their nation. Yeah, Make America Great Again. We should have a level playing field for making money. And now we understand there are some Epstein files that haven't been turned over to the DOJ, located at the FBI in Los Angeles. So I'm sure we know the DOJ did secure thousands of files that had been hidden from the DOJ about the Epstein files from FBI in Manhattan, near New York City. But so far, we haven't heard anything about these hidden Epstein files in Los Angeles, California. So maybe that'll come out. And I'd like to put this forth, my thinking on what's going to happen in Ukraine. So I believe the U.S. most likely is going to withdraw from NATO and the UN and withdraw the U.S. military troops and equipment from Europe. We need them back in the U.S. As I've said, we're going to be engaged in this hot shooting kinetic war here. So we need our troops and equipment back. I believe, and President Trump has said to Ukraine, well, let you fight on to your bitter end, but the U.S. is not going to be involved. So I don't put forth that Russia may take all of Ukraine. That is a possibility. What I do believe is that Russia most likely will engage in taking additional territory. So I'll draw this out for you, which is only logical for them to do while they have their combat seasoned troops already on site. So we have Ukraine right here, Ukraine. And this see if this is better. All right, we have Ukraine. We have Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Right here, we have this area that leads to Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad is a part of Russia. It's separated from Belarus. So we would put Ukraine under Belarus. This area is separated from Belarus. It's owned by Lithuania and Poland. It's called the Suwalki Gap. So we have that. We also have in this area a small nation, Moldova, with a small area called Transnistria. I submit that Russia, I don't know if they're going to take all of Ukraine. I think they're going to take the Odessa port. But I believe while they have their troops on site, that they are going to take Transnistria, and they are going to take the Suwalki Gap. Now, I believe when they finish their fighting for most of Ukraine, that they are going to try and negotiate with Moldova to buy Transnistria, and that they are going to try and negotiate with Lithuania and Poland to buy the Suwalki Gap. I believe if these nations from whom they want to purchase the land say no, I believe Russia will simply take it militarily. Now, I believe this will only happen after the U.S. has withdrawn from NATO. So that's going on. So a short prayer. Now, over the weekend, I came across on Facebook a song being put forth by some of my family members. And when I come across a song my family or friends are talking about, I listen to the song because I want to know what it is that's moving them. And this was a song, Going Down to the River, by the boss, Bruce Springsteen. And it's a song about remembering the past and going down to the river to seek reconciliation and forgiveness. Now, this correlates to a Christian song, The River, by Brian DOERKSEN, and I'll link both of these songs for you. And the Christian song is similar, going down to a river to seek reconciliation and forgiveness. So a short prayer. Going down to the river. Now we pray, Father, in the name of Jesus, whom many call Yeshua. We pray for no more young soldiers passing over any river anywhere on earth. And let us, Father, beat our swords into plows, and let us go down to the river to seek reconciliation and forgiveness for war. Let us go down to the river to once again meet our God and seek peace. And we say thank you, God the Father, God the Son, Jesus, whom many call Yeshua, and God the Holy Spirit. I say to my family and friends, remain steady out there, continue to pray. God is in charge, and He is on the move. I love you, and I'll see you soon.